Come on out. Come over here. Come to me. Come to me. You're okay. Come here. Come on out. Come on out. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go.
Hi, I'm Joel Persinger. I'm the Gun Guy. Thank you very much for all of your support of GunGuyTV. I am extremely grateful for everything you do to help me keep this going. And with that in mind, I am trying diligently to get to 250,000 subscribers, so it'll help me a ton if you would subscribe to the channel, share the video, and like the video. That will make it easier for me to get great guests for you, because the more subscribers I have, the more viewers I have, the easier it is to get folks to come on the show. All right, with that in mind, we're going to talk with Mark today about the pistol brace rule that ATF and Biden are trying to push. And Mark is in agreement, as is the National Shooting Sports Foundation, that it is completely and utterly unconstitutional. Let's go talk to Mark. I had written down, and I think I sent you an email, about a couple other things I wanted to talk about, one of which is the whole Biden executive order against the pistol brace. And that's become a real big mess. How does that affect manufacturers, particularly? I mean, when they spend 10 years telling you something is a legal product and then suddenly decide it's not, that shuts down an entire business and all of its employees and millions of dollars. They did this with the bump stock. They're doing it with the pistol brace. Can you talk more about what's happening within the Biden administration and why they're making this push to do this stuff?
Yeah. So for those who are unfamiliar, the pistol brace has been around for a number of years. It was developed specifically to help wounded warriors who had suffered catastrophic injuries to their limbs, to be able to stabilize an AR pistol, an AR style pistol, on their arm. So there have been letters that have actually been sent by ATF to some of these manufacturers that said, yep, these are absolutely just fine. There's no problem with them. Then the Biden administration came in, took a look at this again. And again, they're doing this at the behest of their gun control supporters who put them into office. So they're looking at this and they're saying, okay, here's somewhere we think we can nip and tuck. And so they went back and they told, through the DOJ, from the White House down to the DOJ to ATF, said, we want you to rewrite this rule. So they came out with the final rule that basically now says that if you have a pistol brace attached to your AR pistol, you either need to take it off and never use it again, or you can replace the upper on it with a rifle length barrel, and now you have a rifle, or you can register it as a short barrel rifle under the 1934 National Firearms Act. And they're saying, we'll help you with this because we're going to waive the $200 tax stamp to get you into the system much quicker. Well, the concern on this is the ATF doesn't have lawmaking authority. This is a criminal statute now, that if you are found to have one of these attached to an AR pistol, it's going to be considered a short barrel rifle. They redefined the law outside of Congress. And they said that anything that has the pistol barrel is now going to be considered a short barrel rifle, and you can be put in jail for possessing it if you don't have the NFA tax stamp that goes with it. So you've got legal challenges that are going through on this. You've got Congress looking into this. Chairman Jordan has been asking questions. The ATF director is going to be up on Capitol Hill later this month answering questions on this. And you've had Chairman Massey at his subcommittee asking some very similar questions. Where does the executive branch derive its authority to make its own law? And the bottom line is it doesn't exist. They don't have the authority to make law. They only have authority to execute the law. The authority to write the law, to draft the law, create law, all exists and is within the Congress itself. That's the legislative branch. And this is the difference between the three branches. And this is why we have the division of powers. You can't have the executive authority making law, executing law, and administering the punishment for those laws all within their own authority. That is outside the bounds of the Constitution.
Well, and unfortunately, they've been doing it for a very, very long time. ATF is famous for this kind of crap. They make stuff up and then they throw people in jail. A big concern that I think is an accurate one is Mark, you keep an eye on this for a living. I own a training company, so I have to keep an eye on it. And then I do this with GunGuyTV, so I keep an eye on it. But I'm going to guarantee you there's probably a couple of million people who own braces and own pistols who don't keep an eye on this because they have families to feed, they have jobs to do, they have stuff to do. They don't have time to sit around and parse this all the time. So you're going to have folks who, if this actually does become something they have to do, are going to have absolutely no idea that they have one of these several choices. And then some cop somewhere is going to stumble on the fact that they've got these things. You've taken people who bought a legal product, which the ATF said was legal for more than a decade, and now they're instant felons.
You're exactly right, and that's been the concern that's been raised by many of us on the outside, and even those within Congress. And I'll give some credit here to again Congressman Jordan, to Congressman Massey, to Congressman Hudson, who as this was being this final rule was being drafted and was being pushed in, he was holding press conferences right there on Capitol Hill with wounded warriors that he's trying to protect their ability. And again, he represents a portion of North Carolina that encompasses Fort Bragg. So this is very much a concern of his and his constituents, that he's got wounded warriors in his area who benefit from this, so they can use this firearm to be able to protect themselves, to be able to shoot recreationally, to be able to hunt with these rifles. And now you're going to take that away. So there's a very serious concern on this, that there's definitive overreach by the executive branch. And they are now trying to criminalize somebody who is a law-abiding gun owner overnight. And literally, you're going to have individuals who are going to be finding themselves on the wrong side of the law on this in a very short order. The Congressional Research Service, their estimate is that there are 3 to 10 million of these pistol braces in circulation today. And that's a pretty wide margin, 3 to 10 million. And that's the best guess, because it's not like firearms where you have a production report. Every manufacturer is required to tell the ATF how many firearms they've produced in a given year. This is an accessory. It's a piece of plastic. This is not something that's regulated like a firearm, and now they're trying to do that. Mm-hmm.
But a brace doesn't just apply to veterans. It applies to somebody who may have had surgery to have a limb removed because it was diseased, or they got injured in a car accident, or they got injured in an industrial accident, or they were born without a limb, or they were born with some infirmity. These things have a broad appeal that even goes beyond wounded warriors.
Certainly.
And so you got a lot of folks out here that have these things that they're not wounded warriors, but they still need them in order to enjoy the shooting sports, which was the purpose of their design. And even those folks are looking at, it's criminal to first of all, to take somebody who served their country honorably and put them in a position of being a felon for buying a legal product. But it's also criminal to take some poor innocent person who didn't serve, who's got some sort of crippling infirmity, who needs it to shoot, and make them a felon as well. It's just wrong from every direction, as far as I can tell.
And Joel, you're certainly right. And there's been a lot of people within that community who have disabilities, who are saying that by putting this under the 1934 National Firearms Act and outlawing this, you are actually violating the American Disabilities Act. So there's certainly a legal argument to be made there, and I think that there are a lot of groups out there that are looking very closely at that as well. So,
well, I think just in general too, if you take away an individual's ability to exercise their Second Amendment right because they are disabled, then you have that as an infringement. Because you've essentially just stripped them of a constitutionally protected, God-given natural right. And so I'm glad you guys are on the forefront of this. Where is this battle right now, and what's happening other than in Congress? You've mentioned some great stuff going on in Congress. I'm grateful for that. What's happening in the courts, if anything? Yeah,
you've seen some of the other groups have taken up the legal challenge on this. We have put our efforts into backing legislation and backing Congress on this. So there are multiple groups on multiple fronts working through this, and we're the ones that we've chosen to take our efforts and place those with the congressional, with the Congressional Review Act. There's one that's going through there. You've seen Congressman Hudson and Congressman Clyde out of Georgia have been pushing the Congressional Review Act that would overturn that. Now, again, we're looking at a very high hill to climb there, because you have to pass the U.S. House of Representatives, which you can do with a simple majority, but you are still in a minority in the Senate. And, of course, that still has to go to the president, and which, of course, he'll veto that. So we know that there's high hills to climb, but there are certainly things that need to be done in Congress now to start to call this into question, to be able to set it up to repeal this and put it back where it belongs.
Sort of brings up another question, and that is with the New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin case, the Supreme Court settled the fact that the right to bear arms doesn't end at your porch. It goes out into public areas. But they also did something, I think, which may have caused a hard reset of Second Amendment jurisprudence in the sense that they changed the rules under which a Second Amendment case could be decided. They got rid of the interest balancing, means tested sort of weird thing of strict scrutiny, intermediate scrutiny, rational basis that the courts were using just to kind of put their thumb on the scale all the time. And instead, they went back to the history, tradition, and the history and tradition of the right, and looking at analogous laws in the history. I just go through that very briefly because some folks may not know that. It came up in a question I had with a buddy of mine yesterday. He said, what did they do? So now they have to look at that period somewhere between 1791 and 1860, 3, 5, 8, somewhere in there, the 14th Amendment, and find a law that actually looks like the law they're trying to enforce now. And if they can't, then it's unconstitutional. So that changes the game a lot. The other thing I saw that they did is they changed the burden. The burden is no longer on the individual to prove that their law is wrong. The burden is on the government to prove that their law is constitutional. Knowing all of that, how has this changed this battle to protect our firearms industry in the courts, or has it?
No, it absolutely has had a huge effect. It is a tectonic shift in the way that the courts are viewing the Second Amendment. And I think this is something that if you're following the courts and you're following the Supreme Court, something that many of the justices have complained about. Justice Alito, Justice Thomas, Justice Gorsuch, Justice Kavanaugh, they've all written on separate occasions that they felt that the Second Amendment was being treated as a second-class right. Justice Thomas specifically on his frustration that the court was not willing to take up a Second Amendment-related case prior to Bruin. When Bruin finally came up, and of course that the majority opinion was written by Justice Thomas, we think that that's actually the most important part of it. While they directly address the question of firearms outside of the home, they also addressed the question of how the courts had been applying their interest balancing tests. And when the government wants to weigh the interests, the government's always going to win. And that's not what our Constitution is about. It protects our rights. Our rights belong to us, not the government. So we think that was the most important. And that's actually caused a lot of the courts to remand cases back down to lower courts for reconsideration under the new guidelines of Bruin. Now, of course, we're still seeing some courts ignore that. We're seeing this happening in New York. We're seeing this happening in other states, but particularly out there in California, where you're talking about Miller v. Bonta, you're talking about Duncan v. Bonta, all those things that are going to be now being remanded back down for reconsideration under the auspices of how Bruin is going to decide things. Justice Thomas very clearly stated that there is only one test when it comes to the Second Amendment, and that is the Second Amendment itself. You can't add or any other test. He said any additional tests are one test too many. So it has to be balanced against the Second Amendment. And I think that is a huge difference on how our rights were being considered prior to the Bruin decision. And I think it's going to have a huge effect going forward.
Thank you again for watching the entire video. I'm very grateful that you do. There is one more segment to this interview. I'll post that one in a few days. In the meantime, please do support the channel by liking, subscribing, sharing, and all that kind of stuff. And if you would like to support financially, you're welcome to do that as well by joining GunGuyTV crew at GunGuyTVcrew.com or on either Patreon or Locals. You'll find us in both of those places. Have a great week. Thank you again. And wherever you go, whatever you do, stay safe.